our industry in remodeling, 10% net profit kind of been the benchmark Hall of Fame, although in the last couple of years it's been kicked up to maybe 12.5, 15, somewhere in there. Then I want to say, okay, guys, let's get out of our industry. Can we look at IT, right? Those guys are making 25, 30, 40% net profit, right? And it's like, I don't think that we as remodelers are ever going to make that. But why do we have to compare ourselves against ourselves, right? Let's get outside of our industry and look at other benchmarks.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, our regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Fine Homebuilding contributing editor and production manager at TDS Custom Construction, Ian Schwant. Today I am joined by certified Pinnacle business guide, George Hodges-Fulton. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. So George, give our listeners an overview of your background in construction and consulting. It's been a pretty varied career for you up to this point.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's not straightforward as you indicated. However, at the end of the day, I really like helping people, right? That's where I get the fulfillment from, is when other people around me are succeeding or winning, right? I also like to complete projects. So, by definition, I'm sort of a natural project manager. I'm sort of genetically coded to getting things done. But I always wanted to be a high school history teacher. So I do hold an undergraduate degree from the University of Virginia in history. When I graduated, I realized that being a teacher wasn't going to fulfill my financial goals for life. So my first job out of college actually was being a site superintendent for U.S. Home in Denver, Colorado, which is now Lennar, right? Track home builder. So in addition to that, I held several other superintendent positions and project management positions in Denver. And when I was working for a mid-size commercial GC, I was introduced to this idea of construction management, meaning that you could actually earn a degree in construction management. And it really just became evident in that situation, in that role, that I needed, to have, not only experience, but to have a degree was going to be super helpful. So ultimately, I went back to school, and I do hold a master's degree in construction management from Colorado State. And then from there, when I graduated, actually, my wife and I moved to Northern Virginia. After I finished that degree, and I knew I wanted to be involved in residential construction, right? I'd sort of started as a track home builder, had gone to the commercial GC side, and I knew I wanted to be in residential. And so I just didn't have the passion for the commercial work. So I was in October of 2003, I was very fortunate. I was reading Remodeler magazine. And at the time, BOA here in Northern Virginia was at the top of the list, at least the list being defined in revenue for the Washington, D.C. area. And so I applied for that position. And sort of, as they say, the rest is history. But I think to answer your specific question, Ian, the construction and the consulting experiences, when I was at BOA, I was introduced to this idea of business operating systems. Specifically in their case, in December of 2003, when I was hired and onboarded at BOA, I was introduced to mastering the Rockefeller habits, which is the precursor to Verne Harnish's Scaling Up. So BOA runs on Scaling Up, or at least they did at the time. And so I was really introduced to these ideas of business operating systems there at BOA. I was there for about 14 years. That's a whole separate story, multiple different titles, different roles there. Running BOA, we grew from about 12 million to 35 million using these business operating systems, or using Scaling Up. From there, I actually left the BOA. I was a partner. I sold my shares back to my partners and became a COO at a smaller size design build landscaping firm here in Northern Virginia, where I actually I then self-implemented the book Traction, right? Or what people know as EOS, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System. written by Gino Wickman. We self-implemented it. It's just another business operating system, if you will. And then I was there for about 2 years, and I really said, hey, I like this idea of business operating systems. I want to go help people implement these business operating systems in their business. So actually in August of 2019, I flew off to Detroit, met with Gino and his team, and became a certified EOS implementer. Did that for a couple of years, and then switched my coaching platform to the Pinnacle business operating system, which is now what I am as a certified Pinnacle guide. So that was kind of the transition. It circles back to that helping people, wanting to help people, wanting to, bring the best out in people, challenge people, coach them, mentor them, and really help people succeed around me. And that's really when I had most of my success and fun at BOA, is when that was happening. So
what was it about that opportunity at BOA that you were given where you got to understand the scaling up model of Verne Harnish and even reading and being introduced to that Mastering the Rockefeller Habits book? What was it about that clicked something in you to see the value in these operating systems?
Yeah, another great question, and probably go on a little bit of a monologue here, big diatribe. But I was at BOA for about 14 years when I started there. As I mentioned, when they handed me that book and I read it, it literally, what clicked was, oh, everything I've done up to this point in my career is being in the business. And this is the first, sort of opportunity where somebody says, hey, we actively work on the business. And I think that really resonated with me for several reasons. One is I grew up in a family business, certainly struggles, and, was really frustrated watching some of the struggles my parents and other family members were going through. And I kept saying, there's gotta be a better way to do this. Right. So that was kind of that first opportunity. In addition to when I was in graduate school, one of the required readings was Good to Great from Jim Collins, which of course has just become a business classic at this point. So I was, required to read that. So I think what happened was I realized that you needed to progress in your career from being in the business to on the business. And it really spoke to that teacher side of me, right? This quest knowledge for learning, and, really sort of diving in and working on the business as opposed to being in the business all the time. As I said earlier, I was there for about 14 years, and there's a whole separate story there, which I could jump in, because one of the great things about BOA is I didn't have the same role or title for any significant amount of time. So I was really given the opportunity to really work on the business, frankly, more often than being in the business a lot of the time.
Talk about some of the differences between in and on the business. I think most small contractors and builders are probably in the business almost entirely and don't even realize it.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think I'll use, sort of BOA as a backdrop for that story. When I was hired in 2003 as a production manager, right, I was sort of, in the business, if you will, right? We were producing the sausage, as they say, right? We were producing the product, or, remodeling homes, things like that. When I'll use my journey at BOA to talk about that, but then I moved, as they said, to the dark side. I became a salesperson, and then I became our sales manager. So that was another opportunity of going from in the business to on the business, right? That's that transition. I think, as many of our listeners and colleagues, as they're sort of owning businesses, developing businesses, they're in the business all the time. And when you become a manager, if you will, it's that first transition from, directing people on the job site, sort of being in the business, to directing people who subsequently are directing people to accomplish the task, right? So now you're sort of working on the business. And in that case, it's still project management, right? The on the business that I'm talking about is okay, when do we take a big step back and work on the budget? When do we deal with our people issues? Right? When do we deal with some of the metrics or numbers that we need to run and own our business? And at BOA, I was really had the opportunity to be an entrepreneur, right? I was really running my own division within the larger organization. And so I needed to be, on the business more often than in the business. But Michael Gerber wrote a great book. I believe it was 1977 was the first version, and called The E-Myth, right? And it talks about this entrepreneurial myth, and it talks about the technicians a lot in our industry, right? Our tradespeople who, it might be an HVAC technician who's installing, sheet metal and equipment and gets frustrated with their current employer and decides to go out on their own. And now all of a sudden they've gone from being in the business as a technician to a business owner, and they need to work on the business. While they might be a great installer, they don't really understand business. So there's that transition there, and elevating yourself up above the day-to-day tactical and working on the strategic side of the business.
So is that where the business operating system comes in?
So, yeah, I mean, I think that's where, you have to develop your skills from, going from, and, using this analogy, going from the Lennox School of, technical training to the business school of running, your business and being on your business. And that's really what business operating systems are designed and help do, is help you get up above the fray. And at the end of the day, they're really designed to help you, harmonize all of the human energy, right? All the people in your business, right? Get us focused in one direction, as we like to say, rowing in the same direction. And really that's what that allows us to do.
So what is a business operating system in general? And you currently right now are with Pinnacle. So what is Pinnacle in comparison to some of the other ones, and where is the benefit for the small or mid-sized contractor, or just small business in general?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And as I said, generically, let's answer the question. Okay, what's a business operating system, right? A business operating system is not software, right? We think of operating systems like Microsoft or that sort of thing. It's not that. It's a way to to harmonize all the human energy in the business, right? Making sure that you have a vision in your head as the founder of this organization. So what is that vision? Where are we going, right? Help us understand that, paint that picture, inspire us. Okay, now how are we going to get there, right? That's the strategy side of it, right? What are the differentiating activities, things like that. And then, you've also got to answer the why, right? Like, as one of my colleagues says, nobody goes to work anymore for 40 years, gets a gold watch and goes home, right? Like we've got to inspire this younger generation, right? And frankly, the people around us, it's not necessarily a generational thing, right? We want to get more than a paycheck. So the business operating system is providing a framework in which to do that. And, as I alluded to, and as you alluded to, there's many business operating systems out there, right? There's the 4 disciplines of execution. Jack Stack's The Great Game of Business. Michael Gerber's E-Myth is a business operating system, right? He taught us the idea to franchise our business, right? Sort of have that franchise model. That's part of a business operating system. Scaling up, of course, Vern Harnish is a business operating system. Of course, EOS, or the entrepreneurial operating system, is a business operating system. But what Pinnacle has decided to do is to say, okay, it's not about the tools or the system in the toolbox. It's actually about the guides, right? Who are we? What is our experience? And have we sort of walked ahead of our colleagues, our clients, in the sense of, understanding the business challenges? And so we at Pinnacle are taking a different approach, where we're not saying, okay, here's our system and here's the tools in the toolbox within our system. We're looking across the landscape, and we're really bringing the best tools from all of these different systems, and really sort of, researching and trying to figure out, what tools do our clients need, and when do they need them, as opposed to a limited toolbox and a prescriptive journey that some of these business operating systems require. And again, you want a framework for anything. So it's not to say that they're wrong. It's just to say that we're trying to pull in the best thought leaders from all across, all businesses, all industries, and really bring the right tools to our clients at the right time.
Would you say that some of the businesses that you work with have things that are similar across all types of businesses, and then each type of industry may have some of its own little quirks to it that you have to approach differently?
I mean, absolutely, 100%. I mean, sometimes, business operating systems sort of by definition are designed to be industry agnostic. And I believe that many of the basic bedrock tools that come with several business operating systems are industry agnostic. How you apply them to the industry, of course, is why the value of a guide comes in, right? Do we have the experience in that industry? Are we a subject matter expertise? Are you, when I'm working with my clients, am I wasting time and calories in the room learning their business so I can apply the tool? Or do I have some background where I can help them? So that's one of the things at Pinnacle is we're not just industry specific, but we do tend to work within the industries we came from, things like that, because we are able to bring that additional value to our clients, and apply the tools and systems that way. On the flip side, though, I want to make it very clear, if you're talking to a Pinnacle guide and they don't have industry experience, that's okay, right? If you're running a dermatology practice, you didn't call me because you need to understand something that you would have learned in medical school. You called me because you have people problems or process problems or, frankly, profit problems, right? And that's where these business operating systems kick in, right? Is helping us run a business so that, we can stop running around so frantically all the time, so chaotically, and actually get control of our business again and take it in the direction that we want to go.
So when you're approached by a prospective client, what characteristics are you looking for in the company and the leadership in general that give you confidence that the company can be successful implementing this?
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of answer that two ways, right? So one is the first part of that is okay. Typically, when do people call me? And when they call me is when they recognize that they want help, right? That they've lacking control in their business, right? They just don't have enough control over the market or their target market or their pricing or their company, and frankly, the business is controlling them instead of them controlling the business, right? Maybe when they have people problems, right? They're really frustrated with their colleagues, maybe even their customers, their vendors, their suppliers, their partners, whatever, right? They're just not everyone's on the same page. No one's following through on the execution side, right? Another one of the characteristics is they just don't have enough profit, right? They're working really hard and they may have even grown from 5-6 million to 8 million, but maybe even their margin went down, right? So there's just simply not enough profit in their business. Or the growth has stopped on the other side, right? They've hit a ceiling. They can't break through. They don't know how to do that sort of thing. So that's typically when somebody sort of picks up the phone and reaches out, right? Is like they've just enough is enough, right? Sort of thing. Usually when that happens, to answer your specific question, I'm trying to figure out, is this person coachable? Right? Are they looking for a quick one-hit fix, sort of a one-hit wonder in which I'm not bringing that to the table, right? Are they coachable as we say in Sandler, right? Do they have enough pain, right? Have they hit rock bottom where they're being vulnerable and they're being open and honest with me? And they're really, even in the first phone call, peeling back the layers of the onion and really sharing with me, kind of what's going on in the business. That to me is one of the biggest leading indicators of, okay, I'm going to be successful with this person and that team because they now want the help, right? So have they gotten to a point where they just realize they can't do it by themselves anymore, right? That they sort of got to wherever they got by brute force, and they recognize that they need something else, a coach to come in from the outside and really help them and mentor them along.
My employer, TDS, works with you, full disclosure, halfway through the podcast. And I'm on the leadership team with the owner, director of design, and the the financial manager, how important is that leadership team to the success of a company and their success in implementing an operating system?
Yeah, it's a great question. Anybody can benefit from a business operating system to some degree. So the smallest team that I work with is literally 4 people total. The leadership team is 2. That's a small, right? And then it goes up from there, and certainly can get much larger, more complex, that sort of thing. But, if you're a single business owner operator and you don't have a leadership team, then most likely a business operating system is going to add a lot of value. It's going to shed a lot of light on situations, but you don't really have the teammates to help you carry the load, right? So if you're an organization of 1, you don't have anybody on your leadership team. First of all, reach out. Happy to talk with you. The reality is you probably need an executive coach, a one-on-one coach, to help you build the business to where you're bringing on some team members at the leadership team level. Once you have, even another person, 2 people, as I said, my smallest team is 2. And very frequently, it's only 3 or 4 people, as in your case, Ian, with TDS, it's only 4 people. You don't need a whole lot. In fact, we say that, 3 to 7 is the sweet spot, right? More than 7, it's too complicated. 2 is a little bit lean, but still doable. And so creating that leadership team is super important, because that's where you're going to get the real value of implementing a business operating system. And again, the goal is to help the entrepreneur, the owner, carry some of the load to get everybody pointed in the same direction. All of that being said, if you're a single, a solopreneur, implementing a business operating system is 100% effective. There are tools in our toolbox, particularly the bedrock tools, the sort of what create the foundation, are super important, right? Having a strategic vision and execution plan, right? Understanding the accountability chart. So, hey, who might be the next critical hire, right? As opposed to just hiring somebody on a whim, but actually having a plan, right? Do I have scorecards? Am I looking at numbers on a weekly basis, even as a solopreneur, that's helping me identify that the business is heading in the right direction? I am a solopreneur by definition, and I run my business. GHF LLC is run on the Pinnacle business operating system. I have an accountability chart. I just happen to sit in every seat. So I have some great conversations with myself, right? Should we do this? Should we not do that? And the sales guy says, well, yeah, we should go do it. Let's generate some revenue. And the ops guy is like, well, wait a minute. Do we have the time to actually successfully, fulfill that obligation that we might go sell? And so it absolutely can work. I hope that helps.
Yeah. So talk about some of those tools. TDS meets with you 4 times a year. One of those is an annual focus session where we meet with you in person for 2 days, and we really dig into some goal setting and some of the other tools. But talk through some of those things like the rocks and accountability chart and other mechanisms of Pinnacle.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. So I'll start this, kind of high level, right? There are 5 principles of Pinnacle, right? So the 5 principles are people, purpose, playbooks, perform, and profit. And so to answer your question, if we dig into each one of those just a little bit, we talk about people, right? So first of all, it's always people first, right? Who, then how. Let's figure out who belongs on the bus, then how we're going to accomplish the task. So the first thing is the culture side. Do we have the right core values? Do we have the 3 to 7 guiding principles that define the behavior that's required of you when you're engaged in our business, right? And then do we have the functions? And that's that accountability chart that you were referenced, right? So we don't call it an org chart. I'm not worried about titles. I'm worried about what you're accountable for. So that's where the phrase accountability chart comes from. Do you understand your roles and responsibilities within the organization? Do you understand your mission, right? So for, and then, do we have 2 or 3 KPIs for each one of those seats within the accountability chart to help that person understand objectively, are they being successful in their role, right? And then, the last, thing in the people side is the coaching, right? Are we coaching our people all the time, right? People are, have an obligation, or we have an obligation as leaders, we should say, to coach our people, right? People deserve great leaders and managers, and that's part of that coaching component. On the purpose side, right, the vision is that strategic vision and execution plan, right? Where are we going? The strategy, of course, well, how are we going to get there, right? As Michael Porter says, how are we different, right? So strategy is not operationally lean. We need to be operationally lean as an organization, but how are we different? How are we acting different than our competitors? That sort of thing. And then do we have that alignment, right? Are we all rowing in the same direction? Are we recommunicating that stuff all the time? The playbooks is just what we used to call the standard operating procedure. The difference is we talk about playbooks. It's more of a high level linear checklist of how to accomplish a task. And so the idea here is that the standard, what used to be the 700-page SOP, frankly, gets printed once. It sits on a bookshelf. It gets, everybody gets frustrated because then no one references it, right? It's just too big of a document. And so the idea here is if we develop a playbook or a checklist, think of it like a pilot taking off, right? Okay, when they sit down in the cockpit, they're running through a checklist. They were given the SOP back in flight school, if you will, right? That's what we call the training manual. That's the 700-page SOP. Nobody wants George looking at a checklist and deciding that I can take a plane off, right? They want me to go to flight school. They want me to have a training manual. But the reality is in our business, we can't be referring to that every day. We just need a checklist, right? Did we get the job done? Did we do it in the right order? It's the 20-80 rule, right? 20% of the documentation gets us 80% of the way there. That's what the playbook is, if you will. And then on the perform side, those are those rocks, right? That's the Stephen Covey idea of, putting the rocks, the big things into the glass jar first, right? What are the 90-day priorities that we need to get done? And then, the pebbles, the water, all the distractions, the day-to-day stuff, sort of filters around it. But putting the rocks in the jar first, focusing on priorities. And we just do it in 90-day sprints, right? And then the metrics, right? I sort of alluded to that with a scorecard. That's one way we measure the metrics. But, do I know on a weekly basis what are the 5 to 15 key numbers that I need for this business to let me know if we're successfully heading in the right direction, right? Am I going to be able to successfully land the plane at the end of the year? And so, generally those metrics are leading indicators to the end result that we're looking for, right? The P&L is the end result, right? When accounting hands us the P&L at the end of the month, there's nothing we can do about it. But if I know that this month I need to generate 40 leads, well, then how many times did the phone ring last week, right? And, in the ideal world, let's say we have a 50% conversion. Then if I need 80 or 40 leads, then I know I need the phone to ring 80 times, right? So that's the leading indicator that we're trying to track in those metrics, things like that. The meetings part of our the perform is, do we have weekly meetings? Is the left hand talking to the right hand? Are we connected? Are we passing information along quickly and efficiently to each other in a structured format with the goal of trying to eliminate, the stop by the office? Hey, Ian, do you have 5 minutes? Hey, real quick. And I think we can all agree it's not 5 minutes, right? It's like 30. And so we just lose time. But if we have this structure in which, hey, I know I'm going to be in the room with my leadership team in a couple days. I know that this is going to show up on the issues list or the list, and we're going to be able to talk about it, things like that. And then, the profit side, right? We've always got to be talking about profit, and profit isn't putting more money into the owner's pocket, right? That's not the goal of profit. The profit is us to measure whether the marketplace is allowing us to be successful, right? Sort of thinking of it like profit is the marketplace rewarding us for doing the job that we said we could do for the price that we said we could do it in within the time frame, right? That's what profit is. And we just need to be benchmarking in our industry and then engineering ways to ensure that we're hitting those benchmarks. And as I like to push my teams, hey, once we hit, in our industry in remodeling, 10% net profit's kind of been the benchmark kind of Hall of Fame, although in the last couple of years it's been kicked up to maybe 12.5, 15, somewhere in there. then I want to say, okay, guys, let's get out of our industry. Can we look at IT, right? Those guys are making 25, 30, 40% net profit, right? And it's like, I don't think that we as remodelers are ever going to make that. But why do we have to compare ourselves against ourselves, right? Let's get outside of our industry and look at other benchmarks.
So if you're a small-time remodeler and you don't have the time or even just the desire to implement a total business operating system, what are some of these tools that you would recommend could be very beneficial for a small operation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And like you said, I mean, like anything, you can layer on, additional layers and make it complex. And one of the things that we say at Pinnacle is that complexity kills growth, right? So it's always got to get boiled down to its simplest format so that it functions for its original intended purpose, right? So to your point, a team like TDS that has a little bit more firepower, there's 4 team members, I expect them to be able to take some of these tools and own them a little bit more than a team of 2 or even a team of 1. So if you're a team of 1, first sit down and let's figure out, okay, what are the core values, right? Let's really, sit down, get in your own head and figure out, okay, what are the real guiding principles? What's the culture I'm trying to develop here, right? And one of the easiest ways, in my opinion, to answer that question is what's a core value violation? If I did X, I would get fired immediately from this firm. And then those become sort of the anti-values, in which case sometimes it's easier to develop some of the values, knowing that you need to go in the other direction of the anti-values. So once you have those core values, I think that's super important, right? Because it's really sort of helping us understand who we are. And again, it becomes part of a recruiting tool, an inspiration tool for those around us that we can inspire with. But the other really fundamental tool that I think every small business owner should have, regardless of their size, is what we call the talent assessment. And I just want you to think of it like an XY axis, right? On the Y axis and the vertical is the cultural side of their business, right? Even if you don't have core values, you can still play along in the sense of saying, hey, does that person play nice with others? When that person walks into my office, am I getting energy or are they an energy vampire, right? So just on a scale of 1 to 10, sort of how much of a cultural fit are they, even if we don't have core values? And then the X-axis is really sort of how productive are they in their seat, right? So even if we haven't defined their major functions yet, but do they get their job done, right? Do they get projects across the finish line in a timely manner, right? Do I have 3 project managers and one of them I'm always going back and doing punch lists, or I feel like getting out of the house is always really time consuming and really drawn out. And when I talk to their clients, they're like, everything went great up until the finish line and then it just didn't get finished, right? Well, frankly, if I was measuring that person's productivity, they would not be much higher than like a 6 on the productivity scale, because they're creating a lot of work for me or other project managers, even if it's documentation or even if it's the emotional energy of dealing with a homeowner, in the sense of, helping manage their emotions, because frankly, they're frustrated at that point and they have a right to be. So that talent assessment and those core values are some of the real, bedrock tools that I like to start with. And again, you can be a firm of 1 person and evaluate yourself with that tool.
Yeah, our experience with the core values is really centered around using them as a lens to look at behaviors and decision making through, especially when we're having to make difficult decisions. And the talent assessment tool, it's very interesting to run that because it maybe takes away some of your preconceived notions that you have about your reports. And when you actually run through the whole exercise and you end up with a graph showing where your employees are, whether they're A potential players, B players, or BC players, it helps you, in my experience, start to think about, well, what does this individual need to make them an A player or a potential player?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I appreciate you bringing it up, right? Because these core values are really designed to, attract the right talent and repel others that don't fit us culturally. And having that talent assessment where we can objectively graph people out and take the subjectivity, out of it. Frankly, there's nothing in the scale that says how long has this person been with the organization, right? There's some of these sacred cows at times that we have a hard time getting rid of or having difficult conversations with. And also, as you said, it helps us understand as leaders and managers, where do I need to go coach this person, right? Because I always want to be coaching people up or coaching them out, right? And so if they're a great cultural fit, but they don't quite understand their role and they're not as productive as they need, then I'm going to get them some coaching and training in their role, right? But maybe they might be fantastic on the productivity side, but they're not such a great cultural fit, right? Then of course the training, the approach is totally different, right? Using the core values to help them understand, right? Using examples where they may have demonstrated a core value in one instance, but actually created a core value violation in the other, right? And again, the talent assessment really helps, you make these decisions. Where do I, as we like to call it, the performance improvement plan, right? Because is it really about their technical skills or is it about their cultural fit? The other thing I like to say, right, super simple, is if this person walked into your office right now and they quit, how would you feel? And just what's your immediate gut reaction? Because if the answer is like, I'm relieved, then I'm like, well, why are they here? Right? If obviously you can understand the opposite of that. But then the other question is to answer yourself is, okay, knowing what I now know about this person, would I enthusiastically rehire them? And I like to ask that question, and it's binary, yes or no. Like, you don't get to explain yourself, sort of thing. And it really does force you to be honest, right? Really looking at yourself in the mirror first, and then with the rest of your leadership team. So those are some ways, again, regardless of the size of your organization, those are some ways in which you kind of just talk about talent.
So throughout my career as a tradesperson, I've gone through periods myself where I wanted to own my own business or move up into management. I know a lot of other people have. Aside from the 3 or 4 books that you've already mentioned here, what advice do you have for that tradesperson who's listening now and has had in their mind, I'd really like to turn my side work into my own business or move into managing teams of other tradespeople? What can you tell that person that would help them with moving along that path?
Yeah, it's again, it's another great question. And I'm going to answer it almost 2 ways, because you almost sort of had, 2 different questions there. One was about, hey, I want to move up into management. One is maybe I want to go start my own, organization, and I want to become a small entrepreneur. So first and foremost, both, regardless of which question, both I think require me to say, are you comfortable running, leading, managing people? Because if you're not, both of those tracks, you're going to find yourself very uncomfortable in, and you're not going to be very successful in. Now, if you may say, well, I really like people, I really feel like I can work with people, coach people, I feel like I can help them deliver and understand accountability, but maybe I don't have the skills to do it, well, then that's a different answer, right? We can help you, coach you those skills, right, if you have the want side of it. But if you're thinking about, sort of moving into management side, I would just encourage you to read the book Pinnacle, written by my colleagues, Steve Preda and Greg Cleary. I think it gives you a great overview of a business operating system. And I think it really helps you, understand, hey, what does it mean? And how does it mean to help manage and lead people, right? That sort of thing. And I think, I said it earlier, but to repeat it, right? If you're going to go that management track, just make sure you understand that you've got to really understand the skill of managing people through people, as opposed to just being the technician who might be managing yourself, maybe a laborer, that sort of thing, or another person, right? Where there's that direct one-on-one connection. On the other side, and again, I know you asked for a different book, but I already mentioned it. But, if you're thinking about moving into your own company, I strongly encourage you to read Michael Gerber's E-Myth, right? It's the entrepreneurial myth. It is called the E-Myth. And I think that has a very impactful lesson for many entrepreneurs and some of the pitfalls that happen when we break off and go start our own business, particularly for the tradespeople. I think it was almost it feels like it was written for specifically our industry, even though, of course, it wasn't.
So tell us about your house. Have you done any work to it or big projects that you're planning on doing? And did you ever pick up a taste for doing any work of your own, being a remodeler for as long as you were?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll answer it first and foremost by saying that the cobbler's kids never have shoes, right? so, we've been in this house, I think it's about 15 years or so, somewhere in there. And first thing I did was actually built our deck and our porch. And by the way, I want to make sure that when I say I built, I project managed the deck and the screen porch. Let's be very clear about that. As I used to say to my old clients at BOA, if you ever see me with a tool in my hand at your job site, we're both in trouble, right? I'm a project manager, not a carpenter. Let's be very clear about that. But the ironic story there is that the total square footage of my screen porch and my deck is actually larger than the first house that my wife and I ever bought in Denver. That house was about 540 square feet, so it was pretty small. But the deck and the screen porch became bigger when we moved into this house. The other one was about 9 years ago. I remodeled our kitchen, structural changes, took out a wall, added a sliding door onto the deck where there was a window previously, etc. And that was a really great experience for two reasons. One is that at the time at BOA, it was taking us about 8 weeks to remodel a kitchen, and I was convinced that there was a better way. So I set out on a path and I remodeled my kitchen in 5 weeks. As my own project manager. And so it really said to me, okay, there is a faster way to do this. And Ian, as you know, working with me, I'm not willing to compromise quality, the client experience, but I'm really big about, understanding how can we stack trades? How can we do things out of order? Sort of thing. Let's not just do it the way we've always done it. So really put together a process where I could remodel a kitchen in about 5 weeks, which of course in our industry, speed while not compromising the experience, the quality is huge. But that was a great reminder of, at that point in my career, I had sort of, become a sales manager and actually the general manager, and just frankly, how hard it is to be a production manager and a project manager, right? It was a very humbling reminder. So that was actually very good and healthy for me and my colleagues at BOA. A little bit of my own medicine, as they say. The other one was most recently, about a year ago, we remodeled my girls' bathroom, and that was another great experience because, frankly, I took it from the client side. Right at that point, I'd been years removed from BOA. I didn't have the contacts anymore. And so going through the selections process, things like that, right, which is always a challenge in our industry, right? The actual design, because it wasn't just quite, just remove and replace. We did a little bit of structural moving in there also. It was just another great experience. And so I think as a consultant, right, working with many design builders in the country, it's reminded me of some of the challenges that you guys are going through literally every day. And again, it was a very humbling experience.
George, it's been great having you on. Is there anything else you'd like to tell or ask our audience before we go? And how can people find you if they're interested in hearing more about your work?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I think one thing I would just say is I have an enormous amount of respect for entrepreneurs, right? That doing what we do is very, very challenging. Every day is a new obstacle. And when I'm talking about entrepreneurs, I'm talking about the whole leadership team, right? It's not just the original owner, founder of the business, that sort of thing, right? If you're a member of a leadership team, you have been put in a position of, supreme power, which of course comes supreme responsibility. And, taking that opportunity and coaching people and mentoring people, your people, as I said earlier, they deserve a great manager, a great leader. And I just implore you to deliver that experience the best you can, right? And if you need help, ask for help. Be vulnerable. It's okay. I still have a lot to learn, and fortunately, I've been learned a lot. I was given a great opportunity at BOA, but there's still a great big world out there of knowledge that I'm hoping to soak up and continue to soak up. But I think, that's might be a little bit of the advice side of it. But, if anybody listens to podcasts and they want to get a hold of me, first, right, send up some smoke signals, right? We can still find you guys in the Midwest, even though I'm in Washington, D.C. But in all seriousness, right, my cell phone, I have no problem. Just call me, 703-955-6537, right? Just call me, text me. Happy to do it, right? Jump on my website, which is just ghf.llc. You can send me an email from there. And frankly, my email is George, George, at ghf.llc. I love to have these conversations, right? So, even if you're just a single solopreneur out there, frankly, floundering around, a little bit feeling overwhelmed, and you just need somebody to chat with, right? Just a sounding board. Or, look, if you're running a $20 million remodeling company and you're also kind of in the same boat, right? You just need a little help, right? Please reach out. It's what I like to help people, and I like to help people succeed. And that's when I get fulfilled. So hopefully I encourage the audience to reach out, and I'm happy to connect with anybody.
That's great stuff. George, thanks for taking the time to join me today. Thanks to everybody for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us wherever you're listening. Helps others find our podcast. Thanks again, everybody.